Hey everyone, thank you again for joining us here at the Railbird Radio. This is season 2, episode 2. I am Chris with the Fractious Stables, joined by my co-host Dan with MB Stables. For the next hour, we're going to go ahead and bring you the latest news, updates, previews, and recaps of the racing at HRP Park. So glad you can join us and look forward to having more people join us on the show in the future. Dan, how are you doing today, and how do you feel about the racing ahead of us this weekend?
I'm doing great, Chris. Glad to be back to a regular schedule here, and yeah, I'm super excited for this weekend. We have some really big races, a lot of interesting storylines, some champion horses that they just released the award finalists of the year, so a lot of similar names in those awards lists are going to be running this weekend. It's a lot. There's a lot to watch, so we have a lot to cover, and yeah, it's exciting. This is sort of the first, I'd say, big weekend of 2023.
Yeah, there are a ton of stakes races on the card for this weekend. We'll get to that shortly. We first want to start off recapping two big races that had implications on the Kentucky Oaks and the Kentucky Derby Trail that happened last weekend. Start off with the Silver Bullet Stakes. That was for the 3-year-old fillies, at the fairgrounds, going a mile and 70 yards on dirt. It's a purse of $150, and lo and behold, you had the winner in Sue Flower, I believe, with Alvarado in the irons. Take me through the race and talk a little bit about your horse and what your expectations were, and if you were pleased with the result. Obviously, you were pleased, but basically what your expectations were going into the race and how you felt coming out.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, super happy to have won. I mean, we were talking last time with Ed on last episode that I was hoping for an off track, and I was very lucky to get it. I mean, there was there was a lot of rain in the Louisiana area in real life, so it's not totally unrealistic. It wasn't a random chance. There was like 70% chance of rain, but we did get a muddy track for those two dirt races, and Sue Flower had a really nice mud track, a couple of really nice mud track works leading up to the race. I didn't enter her just because of the mud. I think that she's a really talented filly, maybe a bit of a more of this a sprint leaning filly at this point, but once you get on the mud, it changes everything. And she sat mid pack most of the race, which is where I wanted her to be. And she had some traffic trouble. Um, I think I got pretty lucky that she got clear with enough time to run your really good filly down Empire Sunset, who she made all the running up front, which is pretty tough to do in the mud. And I really thought you were going to win that race. I mean, your filly was running really well. Her bloodlines are, they tell you that she should do well on any surface, and she should be able to run all day just like her mom up front on the lead. So, going forward, I think that I'm going to continue to try to find Oaks preps for Sue Flower. I think that she's a really nice filly regardless. I don't know if she's quite Oaks quality. It's kind of early in the season, but it's nice to pick up a win. Um, how do you feel? I mean, obviously you were in the unfortunate position of being the horse who did all the running and then got caught at the end. How do you feel?
Yeah, going into the race, I knew with the off track, my filly was going to run fairly huge. She did twice before, breaking her maiden in the slop, and then on a good track, she finished second and behind by a neck in a stakes race. So I thought she would run well. I thought I got clear. Saw you coming. I thought I could still get to the wire first, but you did run me down there. Happy with the result as far as her getting some points. Obviously, minimal points right now, as you mentioned, we're early in the Oaks Trail, but I'm looking forward to the future prep races as they stretch out. And I'm hoping, maybe she can carry her speed or maybe rate a little bit next time out. I don't know. I have to see what my options are, but at least I didn't finish last, right?
Yeah, and speaking of last, I think it's worth us mentioning too that the favorite, or at least the favorite going to the race, and the pick from a lot of us, Shining at Night, ran an incredible race, breaking last, being last most of the way. She made up like 8 lengths in the stretch, and then just got beat half a length. So she definitely backed up that she has that talent. I just think tactically, it's tough to be last in this game, no matter what type of horse you have, no matter what type of pace you have. There's so much traffic involved. These horses are usually pretty similar. It's very, very possible she's the best horse in that race. In fact, I if our athletes changes his mind, I would still love to buy her. I mean, I don't think she lost anything in defeat.
No, you're right. She ran huge, and it'll be interesting to see her on the trail as well with our two fillies. So that recaps the Silver Bullet Day Stakes. We had another big stakes race, the Lecomte, uh, again at Fairgrounds. That's for the boys. So tell us a little bit about that race and what you saw there.
Yeah, sure. So, some of the nice horses in this field really define the way that this race was run as well. Ed's horse Dominant, who we talked about in the lead up to the race, who he was looking really good, working well on off tracks. He went out to the lead just like your filly did in the Silver Bullet Day, and he hung on for a while. The pace was pretty hot, so it wasn't surprising that he sort of faded at the end, but just in a similar way to the Silver Bullet Day, and I think because we have this new race engine, it's important to take note of these things. We saw those mid-pack horses close really strongly and finish up, and especially in the last furlong or so, it was a really tight and exciting race. Coming down to the wire, it looked like Duke of Satire, one of the outside horses from Nakamura, was going to win. He was in front the most of the end of the stretch, but my horse Night Raider, who has proven himself on muddy tracks, he got the last jump on them, and I like to think that maybe it was that little champion bloodline tactical edge that got it done for him. The first graded stakes winner for tactical, so I'm pretty biased, but love to see it. It definitely moved him up in my eyes to see that he could do so well on this new race engine because he was such a slow gate breaker in the previous engine. I felt like he was compromised pretty often in his races, so I'm excited to see what's next. And also worth mentioning is Timeless. Dom's horse ran really big, had more traffic issues than Night Raider, and he was closing well late. And then, of course, worth mentioning, as we sort of spoke about ahead of time, we didn't think Kentucky Pharaoh would appreciate the track, and he certainly didn't. And I think that it's just unfortunate sometimes if your horse, you could be a fantastic, talented horse, but if you don't like off tracks and it comes up muddy, you kind of might as well scratch. There's really nothing you can do. What do you
Let me
think?
ask you though.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me ask you though. I mean, obviously the race before at Aqueduct, it was an off track. He didn't run all too bad. He split the field. He was on the pace. Do you think it's more or less the off track, or do you think what we talked about with the race engine down at the rail had anything to do with it?
My feeling is, well, two things, and we have a lot to cover today, so we weren't gonna get into it. I feel like we've definitely seen some different track biases in the race engine the last week or so. I'd say maybe 2 weeks after some of the complaints came out. I feel like we've seen some very different pace dynamics, and the rail's been doing a bit better. So I I'm reluctant to give him that excuse right now. I'm one of I'm a firm believer that the way that off tracks are coded in this game, each successive one from good to muddy to sloppy, it just gets harder and harder for a horse who doesn't like it to compete. And I feel like what we see is he may have won that race if it was fast, lose by 2 or 3 if it was good, lose by 5 or 6 if it was muddy, lose by 8 or 10, to 10 if it's sloppy. We see that sort of dynamic, and I'm projecting there's a lot that's happening in a race, but I have to imagine the off track hurt him more than the rail. But just a guess.
Sure, yeah, and I'm kind of leaning that way towards the horse I had in there as well, Lunar Victory. I can only believe it's the off track because his first two starts he ran very well, and last two have been off tracks and hasn't shown much. So I should find out shortly if he's any good or if it's just the off track. I think that does play a huge part, as you said. As you mentioned, also Duke of Satire ran a great race. I think he's going to be one to reckon with on this Derby trail throughout.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned Timeless. You have some news on your Derby dozen, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. So we have the second version of the Derby Dozen Week 2 after this weekend. So we had a few things happening, and Timeless was an interesting story. I think that he obviously ran a really big race, and it was enough to put him in 12th place in this week's Derby Dozen. And I know Dom well, so I feel like it's okay to call him out a little bit. But most of the reason he showed up 12th was because of one certain uh, panelist being very high on him now. So I think the owner definitely, the owner and trainer of Timeless definitely liked what he saw in that race, and he's moved up well. And there's a lot of horses that we don't know anything about at this stage. who are not getting, they're not getting more than one or two 12th places on these lists. And so a horse like Timeless, who got points, who showed in the new engine he can run, I think he deserves a shout out to be in that 12th spot. So he did sneak on to the end of the list this week.
Yeah, and you had a couple of horses that just narrowly missed the list, and I think one of them was Duke of Satire that we just spoke about. I was surprised he didn't actually bump some off and make it on to the top 12.
Yeah, I noticed with the panelists that there was they definitely took, they looked at Kentucky Pharaoh's performance and said, you know what, I'm going to pass until I see more. He unfortunately fell off the list, only was on a couple of lists sort of at the bottom and wasn't close to being in the top 12. But Duke of Satire, he was the second horse to just miss being on the list. So some players took notice, but I think that what we're going to see is that the panelists are pretty firm on who they think are the most talented, and you're going to have to do more than just running competitively in some of these lower prep races to prove it. So I think obviously the race we're going to get into later, the Southwest is going to have much more backing of if you do well in that race. I think people will start to take notice. But Duke of Satire just missed, along with Peace Pipe, who was on the list last week, but due to some shuffling, Timeless gets on. A few other horses like that I'll mention later get on. He just fell off, and then Magical Sunset and Hurricane Fly, who were also in that just missed area. Or actually, Hurricane Fly was 12th, so another horse who got bumped because of not running.
Yeah, no activity on that one. Same with Magical Sunset. I do want to follow up on Magical Sunset. Looks like that horse worked on the 23rd, 6 furlongs at Gulfstream, 110 and 2. So Riggins looks like he has a horse on his hands there.
Yeah, and
It'll be interesting to see where he shows up.
Riggins is an old school player. I feel like the work at Gulfstream may be a tip off that he's going to be in the Holy Bull, which I believe is next weekend. So we'll see if he shows up there. I think that would be a great spot for him. He did very well in the Sham, big purchase recently. I think that that workout backs up that talent. So just a question of, does it translate into beating the best of the best in these preps?
Yeah, I agree. So you have Timeless in 12th, 11th. Who do you have there?
In 11th, we have He or High. I don't know. We still don't know how to pronounce it. But yeah, I guess there is some news you may want to share about High, who drew pretty well in the Southwest. What were your thoughts after seeing that field? I see he's not in it anymore.
Yeah, he drew well. I heard there was some talk of some rain off track, and after last weekend with Lunar Victory not running well on off track, I chose to wait it out a week. He'll go in the Holy Bull next weekend at Gulfstream Park. That field this weekend for the Southwest is absolutely loaded. I want to give him the best chance to earn some points. It's not that I don't think he's good enough. It's just I would like to face that kind of field maybe later on down in the trail versus right now in late January and EPR suffering a little bit.
Yeah, I totally see where you're coming from there, and he's coming off a bit of a layoff, so I feel like facing about 7 or 8 of the top 12 horses in the crop is not the best formula, especially if you don't know if it's even going to be fast. So that's definitely a tough spot to be in.
Tough decision. And then the jockeys as well. You could probably get into that a little later, but the jockey situation, I wasn't able to get a great jock as well. So it all factored into my decision.
Yeah, fair enough. So in 10th, we have a horse that I believe is in the Southwest. Yeah, he is in the Southwest. State of Fury. He was on the list last time as well. He was actually tied for 10th last weekend as well. So stayed in the same spot as last week. He did have a work at Oaklawn Park in between our shows, 111 and 1, which I would say is a bit on the slow side, but he's kind of a grinder. Yeah. He comes from last. What are your thoughts on that work and where he stands?
Yeah, if I were the connections, I would like to see a faster work than that. It looks like he's been working like that throughout, though. If you look back, December 8th, 111 and 1, January 7th, 111 and 2. So he hasn't always been the fastest worker. So we'll see how it shapes up for him this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. So next up, we have the recent winner of the little comp, Night Raider, who started to get some respect. He was in ninth place and sort of in that next tier of horses. I think a pretty fair rise in the rankings for him after winning a prep. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. He has to be up there, middle of the pack. I think that's where he belongs after a big win, and he can only continue to rise.
Absolutely. Next, we have another tie. I mean, in the theme of dead heats, as Horse Racing Park loves our dead heats, we have actually two dead heats on the list. This time, a tie for seventh. We have Naples again. Um, he slipped a little bit on the list this week, which is interesting to see because he didn't do anything other than work a pretty slow 5 furlongs in 58 and 3. I think the panelists may have taken notice of that, but he's also in the Southwest, so another opportunity to prove himself. What do you think of Naples?
Yeah, probably just the inactivity from him. He's going this weekend, so he'll either drop or move up on this list after this weekend's race.
Absolutely. Next up, we have also tied for seventh is Sirius Black, who Sirius Black was right next to Naples last week. Now they're tied in seventh, slipping a bit down the list. But Naples didn't have any activity. Or sorry, Sirius Black didn't have any activity, so nothing really new to speak about. I think we covered last week. He's a talented horse with a lot to prove still in terms of consistency.
Yeah, I'm surprised he hasn't had another work. Maybe he's just taking a little more time with them after that mile work.
Yeah, and I think he's probably waiting for the Gulfstream races or something like that. So maybe just not in the schedule yet. All right.
Yeah, he'll pop up shortly.
Next up in six, we had Pink Shark. Pink Shark actually moved up this week, which, just I think this is just the nature of the list. Sometimes feelings are a bit different week to week. Maybe some people listened to our show and felt like we were being a little bit harsh on Pink Shark and wanted to move him up, but he moves up from eighth to sixth this week with no activity as well, similarly coming out of Brian's barn. So not much else to say here, but um, actually, I just know. I mean, I'm not sure if he grew. I don't know if he was still 16-2 hands last week, but just it stood out today just how big that horse is.
Yeah, he's a big horse, and I guess he didn't get any takers on his offer to sell him either.
Yeah, nothing that we know of. Nothing that Brian's mentioned. So maybe the asking price is too high, and we'll see if he can prove it.
There you go.
All right. Next up, we're getting to some familiar names. Not much of a big shakeup. We have Deep State at number 5. I guess the big story with Deep State this week is Jim very much heard our concerns about his mile works and if he was a bit of a plotter, and he proved those wrong with a really swift 136 and 3 workout.
Yeah, he did great work.
And we noticed from the workout that the fractions were faster. I felt Jim mentioned it was more to to his liking of the pace that he likes to run at. So I think that it definitely applies more to how he's going to run in races, and that's the kind of horse in races he seems to be. So I think it backs it up very well, and he's very deserving of that 5th spot.
Definitely.
Getting into our top 4 this week, a tiny bit of a shakeup, and I think a deserving one because last week I felt like Sweet Shine was a little high at 3. But this week he comes in at 4. He is in the Southwest. He posted a pretty nice workout of 110 and 2. For me, I think he has a lot to prove this week. I think he's in a really tough spot. I think that number 4 spot is really hanging in the balance this week with all the big guns in the Southwest. But what do you
I
feel
don't
about
know.
him?
Though, I mean, the more I look at him, the more I like him. To be honest with you, I just love his tactability, and he looks like he's improving for you. That 110 and 2 work, as you mentioned, that's exactly what you want to see going into the race. I think he's going to show up big for you.
I hope so. One thing I will say with the potential of rain, I don't really have much information on whether or not he would like the rain. From what I can recall, Sweet Sweats there have been some that have been able to handle the rain. His mother, she won a Pennsylvania bred stakes in the rain, so she's not awful, but she also didn't do pretty well. Didn't do well at all on good tracks. I think he's probably iffy. If it comes up muddy, he wouldn't be a horse that I think moves up a ton, but hard to say. Yeah, he's right in behind the most talented ones. I think that's an appropriate place for him to be.
I agree.
Next up at 3, we have Quiet Return, another horse, unfortunately for me at least. Now that you scratched, in the Southwest, phenomenal horse. Nothing since our last show, but he has a huge opportunity to prove himself as being a legit dirt horse in the Southwest. I think this is it's not make or break because obviously he can run on dirt again after, but
Sure.
just
Yeah,
a phenomenal opportunity to prove himself.
I think so. To even establish his placing even more, he's number one on my list right now, with another one coming up here right in front of him, right below him on my list. So it's going to be interesting. It's almost like a Kentucky Derby race going off this weekend.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about Quiet Return, he probably has the most volatility of any horse on the list in terms of his placing. He's on some people's number one horse. You know, you mentioned he's your number one horse. He was another panelist's number one horse, but he's also
Yeah.
not even on the top 12 of some other people who just say, you know, he hasn't done anything this year. I think he's going to end up on
Wow.
turf. There's just, you know, a lot of disagreements about him. His build doesn't seem like a Derby horse. I think it's just a question of, you know, talent versus background. Do you think he's going to be more of that turf miler, or is his talent overwhelming? So
Yeah,
I
he
know,
might be better on turf. Yeah, I mean, obviously he's ran huge on turf already, but that last start he had on dirt was no slouch there, finishing second by a nose. So until he proves me otherwise, I have to stick with him.
and just as a fun aside, I feel like it's worth mentioning. You know, I own both his dam and his sire, so you know, thank you to All in the Gate for tipping me off to this combination because his full brother, who's a yearling, who's now 2 year old, he's pretty much the fastest 2 year old I have. I mean, there's some that are right in the same range, but he's breezing 34 and 2 on the farm. So I you know, that doesn't affect what Quiet Return is, but I think that kind of supports the idea that there's something special in that blood.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and it reminds me a lot of Anush Command. Although, and that was a horse that I had maybe 2 years ago in his 3-year-old season. I acquired him. This horse is obviously, I think, a little better at this stage, but could run dirt, dirt or turf, and Derby fever sets in, and you have to try it until you're proven otherwise. And he can always fall back on turf later on this year. There's some big races if the dirt doesn't work out for him, but if I were the connections, just like All in Gates doing, I'd be putting him on the trail as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, and so we reached the top of our list, and to remove any intrigue, as I mentioned before, we do have a dead heat for first
Wow.
this week. So Garog Laga and Shoofly are inseparable. Although, you know, I was surprised to not see Shoofly in the Southwest. I think probably a smart decision from Lazy Eye to keep him out of the fire. But Garog Laga drawing the rail, working a bullet 110 flat.
Sheesh.
He's just a superstar. I mean, I can't get over how good this horse seems to be.
Maybe that's another reason why I scratched, possibly.
I wouldn't blame you a bit. I mean, it's probably the reason I look at Sweet Shine and thinking, you know, he's just going to be a donkey in that race because I don't know how I can keep up with Garoglaga. But hey, it's horse racing. You know, Garoglaga has lost before, but the
Sure.
rail
Yeah.
and there's so many factors working in his advantage for this race.
Yeah. That, like you mentioned, that 110 flat workout, unbelievable. I don't even have some of my best older horses working that time. So he's going to be tough in there.
And yeah, and to make matters worse, he posted the fastest mud workout in the whole crop. So if it rains, I don't think he'll be in any trouble at all. In fact, it might help him because it might eliminate some of his competition. You never know.
Yeah. No hindrance there for sure.
And then Shoofly tied at the top again. He's not given up his top spot yet. He did post a workout in 110 and 4 at the fairgrounds in between our races. Interesting to see him go out pretty quickly in that work, and it was actually a slower time than we saw last July at Del Mar at 6 furlongs. Um, what are your thoughts there on that workout and what it means for sort of what we were saying last week about his projected growth path? I'd say.
Yeah. You gotta think to yourself, is he slowing down a little bit? Is it just a culmination of all the races last year? You have a little bit of a gap too. You have about 2 weeks between works. Is that a factor as well? 110 and 4 is not terrible. That's kind of in the middle of the road for these horses on this list. So I wouldn't be too displeased with that figure there.
Yeah, and I will say I feel like he is the type of horse who moves up from his workout times a bit more than a Roglaga, who I feel like Roglaga is that prototype, just super speedy talent who what he works is what he is.
Yeah.
So I'm not super concerned, but you always love to see them improving, not just maintaining that level of talent.
Yeah, I agree with you. It'll be interesting to see where he pops up and what his preparation for that race is going to look like.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that caps off your Derby dozen. You got it straight from Dan there. Great list. Surprised to hear certain things, like you mentioned, Quiet Return not being on the list at all on some of them. So this weekend will definitely prove itself out because, as we mentioned, there's a multiple of those horses in the Southwest, which is a grade 3 at Oaklawn Park, going a mile 16th on the dirt. And again, number tied up at the top of the list, Goru Glaga for Arndale Farms, is going to have Luis Saez in the saddle. Again, drawing the rail. He's part of the reason why I scratched my horse out of the race. I'll be honest. Then seeing that again, that 110 flat workout, he's just going to be super tough. He's coming out of a great race where he won by a nose in the LA Futurity. He's training well. We said everything we have already on him about his ability, his talent. And I think he's going to show up once again. He's going to be tough to beat.
Yeah, I agree. In looking at all the horses in this race, he's a standout when it comes to works. I think that we're going to get into later as we go through the horses in the list. There are some horses who maybe they have some other traits that will help them compete with him, but just looking at the pure talent we can see, it's just there's no better than him right now. He's better than what Individuation was last year, and Gigabyte for that matter. So it's just a bit scary to go up against a horse like that who is just he's on a roll. He's fast. He has no weaknesses. He draws the rail, gets the best jockey, has a great trainer. It's tough.
Yeah, it sure is. It'll be interesting to see what his development curve is going to pan out to be, though. He is super advanced right now, as you mentioned. And he's going to be super solid horse in this race. Going to be hard to beat. Well, what is that going to look like when May rolls around? So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
So who do we have at number 2? One of your horses, huh?
Yeah, so in the second gate we have At the Gates, a gelding from Lockdown and Catherine the Great, bred by Patterson and sold by Fractious at the auction. So yeah, I was the only person to put a bid on this horse, and I got a bit lucky.
Crazy,
A bit
crazy.
a bit lucky because he didn't have a mile work yet. But I saw the debut at Saratoga. He ran really well in a competitive field. I thought it was a no-brainer to just throw a bid on there. And I know you told me afterward that Ryan had really liked this horse when he had him as well. So just got a bit lucky that I think he has a solid amount of talent. He ran a pretty nice race in the gray against he high whatever. I think that's the full name
Yes.
now. We're just gonna have to say he
I'm gonna
high
change.
whatever.
I'm gonna change the name to whatever.
Yeah, he ran a really nice race there, but I think it's going to take that sort of the effort he had at Keeneland and that Maiden, where he pulled away from them, even despite trouble, to even compete with some of the horses in this race. But I have to run him. He's a Derby type horse, and he's one of the better ones I have. I don't have the luxury of having a 10 types like Brian does, and I want to be in these races and compete and see what works and see what works in this race engine. So it's a good post for him, and I'm hoping he can be pretty competitive. I do like Paco Lopez, the jockey I got aboard. I think he's been really good recently.
All right, great. Number 3 was my horse, High, scratched out of the race. Number 4, we have Jedi Order for Delta Farms, Farrier in the irons. This one's coming out of Oaklawn Park race, Smarty Jones, back on the first of the year. Ran pretty decent, was closing. This is a big step up. Two back just broke his maiden in a dead heat. Acid test, I would say, for me. Workouts, fairly good. 59-1 in breezing. I like that work, but I would like to see a little more stamina works involved there. Even a 7 furlong breeze or a mile in there. You don't even see a 6 furlong breeze for the last month and a half. So it'd be interesting to see what this horse has to offer in this race.
Yeah, this one's not been ducking any competition. He ran in one of the toughest maiden races of 2022. I know that a lot of winners have come from that field and stakes competition, and then ran 4 or 5 wide in the Smarty Jones against Sweet Shine. Ran second. He's a very tough horse. He's a grinder. I don't think he's the type who's going to finish last very often in races, but it's definitely a step up in speed level. And you notice sometimes with these horses that have this grinding style that when the races get faster and tougher, that's when they struggle to latch on and maybe don't give their top effort. But I also wouldn't be shocked to see him hit the board. It's not he's definitely a competitive horse. It's just hard to compare him to Garoglaga and Quiet Return and some of these horses.
Yeah, I agree.
Next up, we have the curveball, or we have a few curveballs in this race. A filly.
We do. We do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously, last year there was a lot of controversy because we had several fillies win Derby preps early in the year, and that was actually true the year before too. We had some fillies win Derby preps, so it's not uncommon at horse racing park. The 5 pound advantage I think is a big deal. And the first of these fillies in the race is also trained by one of the best trainers in the game, Smokey Stover. We have Tokyo Story. I will say I don't think this is his best filly. I've seen some fillies rolling around in some maidens and allowance races that he's just got started to get going after a summer of ads testing that seemed to be more talented. But she was a really good 2-year-old. She was a big filly. I think that could help her compete against the boys, and she won the Golden Rod in her last race. But I think Smokey's hoping for some filly magic to compete here, and I guess I wouldn't be shocked. You can't be shocked by anything like that anymore. But her last race was almost a second slower than Garoglaga's. I don't know if the 5 pounds can reverse that. What do you think?
Yeah, here we go again. Just comes to my mind. I don't know. I'll be honest. I think it's ridiculous to see these fillies in these races. I know you had a filly win one of the races earlier this month, and I gave you a little bit of crap about it, but
Deservingly.
I get it. Players are trying to game the system and whatnot. I think it needs to be an exceptional filly to win. You take a look at her work, 137-1. Compared to the other horses in this field, I just don't think it stacks up whatsoever. I don't care about the weight advantage. I don't think it should play that big of a part to make a horse that competitive in a race. But maybe I'm the only one who thinks this way.
And if I remember last year with Shadow Police, I think Smokey ended up having the opinion after a few other tries and seeing other people's fillies run, and even seeing some other fillies succeed, but just not as well as Shadow Police. I think he came to the conclusion that she was just special. She was a top filly in her class, no doubt about that. I don't think Tokyo Story is on that level. So
No, I agree with you on that. Yeah. No, nowhere near her level. She was a special filly last year, and that made a little bit more sense to try it out. But even then, I think the results that we saw were not biased, but more heavily weighted with the weight break, and I don't think it should be that case. But we'll see how this one plays out. Number 6, we have Sweet Shine. We talked about your horse. You want to talk a little bit about the draw, the jockey, and how you feel he's coming into this race?
yeah, I think everything went perfect. I got the jockey I wanted. I got the same jockey back from the Smarty Jones. I didn't think that I was going to be able to get. I think I may have had Luis Saez number 1. I always put him number 1 because he's my favorite jockey in the game right now. But I figured I wouldn't get him because there's tons of earnings in this field, and the formula for jockeys is pretty rigid to who has the best experience with them now. So getting Silvera, the jockey from Parks, I believe he did well with him last time. I think that the balance style really helps Sweet Shine because he's not a really fast horse, but he can be put into a race, and I think he's going to need to be put in a race like this with the tight turns at Oaklawn. I think post 6 is perfect. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I mean, as we said before, there could be some voodoo on the rail that the rail's just not as good. I think Sweet Shine being in post 6 is really good for him because it's going to give him the opportunity to hopefully clear over on some of the slower breakers like Tokyo Story and Jedi Order on his inside and even at the gates, and hopefully sit a really nice position. I just have a question: is he elite? And it's been a while. I feel like it's been a while since I had one that I bred. I had I've had their parents and loved their parents for a while on the track and bring them to the races. So many of my recent really good Derby horses are ones that I purchased. So some of my favorites over the years have been horses like Centerpiece or those types that I bred and had in house. So Sweet Shine, I really hope he can be that kind of horse. So mostly just hopeful. We'll see.
Yeah, listen, he lost his first out, which happens a ton here in HRP, right? So that's no big deal. And then he rattled off 3 wins. So, I wouldn't get too down on this horse. And I think he has a great shot. And he's, like you mentioned, he's perfectly drawn. He's right in the middle. He's not too far inside, not too far outside. And I think he'll run his race for you, and you'll see what you have.
Hmm.
Yeah. Next horse, we have another filly, right? Tell a little bit about this filly that my good friend Dave has in here.
Yeah, so Dave has another filly. Not surprising. It seems he only ever runs fillies in Derby preps. So he's a veteran of this move. She's a nice filly, but again, she's even slower than Tokyo Story in terms of race times. She was struggling against the fillies in stakes races at times. Her workouts are good, but not great. I don't see it. I think this is reaching. And I think it's one of those things where I just wonder, couldn't she have been better running against the fillies? I mean, and try and go for the Oaks. I mean, maybe the system is just broken and she's going to do well, but this is the sort of race that if you are in it, it's the most taxing type of race for a horse, maybe outside of a Breeders' Cup or a Derby. You're kicking your horse if you don't do well in it, right? So those decisions, you have to make those decisions, and I get why they're trying it.
Yeah.
I don't know about her chances. I would be more surprised if she won than Tokyo Story, but either one would be shocking.
Yeah, I agree. I would like to see those fillies in races for fillies, but I'm not the owner. We'll see how it pans out for him. Number 8, we got Crack the Party for Maximilian Farm with Jaramillo in the irons. This again is the horse that posted a huge work on January 11th, 136-2 for the mile. Came back 58-1, so another good work for him. He's coming out of a turf sprint maiden special cowbred race that he won by a nose. So a lot to prove, but again, that mile work on dirt, it shows he can handle it, right?
Yeah, I think if I check, I think he was the last horse to make this field. So he earned, yeah, I get, other than the also eligible, obviously, but the last horse to make the initial field. So just snuck in, and this is the type of horse you want to sneak into the field. He is the ultimate wild card. This is yeah, it's a question of raw talent versus experience. He has zero experience. He's never done, his maiden he broke on turf. He's never run a competitive race on dirt, but has the fastest dirt work in the crop at a mile. So there's a lot to like, just purely based off of that, but also because of who trains him. I think Max is great with these types of horses. I've heard him, mumbling around the backstretch about, come and catch me. You really gonna catch this horse? So I would not be surprised if Max uses his typical tactical style with him. The biggest question mark I have, though, is a horse who's 15-1 hands and 1,123 pounds really going to win the Southwest compared to all these developed beast horses? I mean, this horse may
Makes
be
him
the best.
faster.
He may be the Travers. Yeah, could make him faster. You're right. I feel like this one's a better futures bet for the Travers than for the Southwest. If you know what I'm saying. So I think he'll run well. I think the new engine is pretty, the workouts have been pretty telling with the new engine, so you don't have to worry about as many outside factors. But he has a tough task with, basically no experience against, routing in dirt. I think he'll be competitive, but he wouldn't be my pick.
Yeah, ultimate acid test. Who's up next?
So next up, we have a massive horse, the Alchemist, 16 hands, 1266. So a lot of my older horses are not even that big. He's been a hard knocking horse. He won the Street Sense last year at Churchill. He ran 7th in the Springboard Mile from the rail back when the rail was really nice. I think he has a tough task here. Nakamura is a great stable. He's been getting a lot of mile works, which is interesting to see. And, maybe that extra bit of stamina is what he needs to compete in these fields. But the best thing going for him is he's had this up and down, win one, lose one bad, win one, lose one bad running form. And he's due a win now. But I think he has a tough task ahead of him with his recent works and the races he's shown to compete against the best of the best in this field. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he's overmatched in here. Again, he's drawn outside too. That doesn't help him any. The works are really slow for me. So he's taking a shot. Can't blame him. We all get the fever.
And he ran second on a yielding turf course, and typically the off turf translates to off dirt. So I think that could be positive for him, which is worth mentioning. But I don't know if that would be enough.
Yeah. Number 10, we have Quiet Return for All in the Gate with Gaffleone in the irons. We talked a lot about this horse. Again, number one on my list. Would have liked to see him draw a little closer inside. As his last race, he was also in post 10.
Yeah,
Ran a hell of a race, finished second by a nose. Go ahead, Dan.
sorry, I was jumping the gun there. It was exciting to see that you mentioned that because that was what I was going to say. Is it's a repeat of the LA Futurity where he was at post 10 and Garoglago
Yeah.
was at post 1, and that probably cost him the race, frankly. Because if you watch the running of that race, he was wide. He had to push over. Garoglago could just sit right there in the perfect spot, not have to move, and then wins by a tiny nose after passing him down the stretch. So yeah, really unfortunate that he's outside. I think the outside's a little easier to deal with than it was in the past engine. So I, honestly, if my horses don't win, I would love to see Quiet Return win because I like the name. It's simple and uh, having the bloodlines from my stable. I like everything
Yeah,
about
you,
this horse.
you got some skin in the game on this horse.
Yeah, yeah. So you know me, always non-biased about nothing, everything. So I'd love to see him win, and I kind of like that superstar turf horse trying dirt angle. I think it's really cool. I
Yeah,
know some
the
people think it's unrealistic, but I think it's cool.
yeah, the versatility. Yeah, it's impressive. I look forward to seeing him make a move on the outside like he did the last race and rush up, and hopefully he wins. Again,
Al-
confirmation is kind of crazy when you look at it, but again, until he proves you differently, you got to try it out.
Also, I better mention last time he had to carry 4 pounds more than Garoglaga in the LA Futurity, which carrying 124 and running the race he ran last time is just insane. So this time he's even weight with everybody other than the fillies. Maybe
Oh
that's
yeah,
all he needs.
yeah, good point. I didn't even notice that.
All right, coming up in post 11 is the last, thankfully, the last of our fillies in this race. Beautifully gruesome. A filly from Twin Towers Racing. I know Tommy loves the fillies. Again, this is a filly who you would probably would not even make the top 12 Oaks horses. Maybe she'd be right on the border. She did run some decent races, but she's just another filly, and the workouts are pretty solid, a 137.1, but not like the top males, and just probably not the type of horse you think should be on the Derby Trail. I'd be pretty surprised if she won.
Yeah, I agree with you. Again, this is a filly I feel should be in filly races. Her work stack up closer to those than they do these. So, but good luck to him in this race.
Mm-hmm.
Number 12, we have State of Fury for Alidar Stables with Alvarado in the irons. This horse is kind of interesting to me, Dan. Slower side on the works, but if you throw out the juvenile, he doesn't have a bad record to go by.
Yeah, and but he has a very interesting breeding to me. With state having out of a state police dam, Fire Fury sire. Fire and Fury's biggest weakness as a sire is that he tends to produce more of that sprinter up to miler type. But state police coming from Cherokee Sunset might be one of the better routing influences in the game. And I feel like this horse runs more like a state police than a Fire and Fury. Interesting to see that Alidar has not Triple Crown nominated him yet. Worth like a PSA to everybody that it's $1 to nominate horse until February 1st, and then after that it's $10 until April
Right.
1st. So I definitely think this one deserves to be nominated, and I gotta imagine this horse is going to be towards the back, unless he's a horse who only was back there because he couldn't break out of the gate. I feel like he's going to be in the back and make a run late, and just hope it's not like the Breeders' Cup Juvenile where it's from last.
Yeah, he's got to deal with that outside post again. So, tall
He's
task,
he's used to it.
you know.
It's a
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
unlucky draw horse there. Not even one inside post in his career. So,
That's crazy. And he's a grade one winner to boot. So,
yep. All right. Next up, we have Napples, horse we've mentioned a bunch on the Derby Dozen list. Um, yeah, I don't. I gotta say, I don't love the 58 and 3 workout. But if there is mud, there might not be a better mud influence in the game than apples to oranges. He's a horse who loved the mud when he ran. He's a horse who really had no business running too well in the Derby. I feel like because he was a small foal, he was a late foal, but almost won it in the slop that year. I think that those genes they tend to play through, and Naples has a really nice muddy breeze as well. He's a tough horse. It's not that he's not talented. I just feel like this is the horse that you want to keep posting these fast workouts, maybe a 57-4 or 58 flat. Coming off the Kentucky Juvenile, I think there's a slight chance he's a bit rusty coming into this one and may need the race, and it's a tough post, but he's super good. He gets the jockey back aboard. I like him. I just have my concerns. What do you feel?
Yeah, tough post outside, big horse. He's going to have to make a late run, I think. He's going to get shuffled back somewhat. He's not going to be towards the front. So he's going to need some racing luck to do some damage in this race, I would say.
Absolutely.
Number 14, we have American Grandeur. This is from Twin Towers Racing with Mario Gutierrez in the irons. I'm not one to bash anybody's horses on here. I think everybody deserves an equal chance to win a big race. But in this race, this post, everything else that I'm seeing as far as past performances, I just don't see it. He had a tough time on turf winning races. He tried dirt last time out, had a good draw. He was way back last early, didn't make much ground. Last work is 137-1. I don't see it for this horse, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think Tommy is a very aggressive placer of horses, especially in these big stakes. He wants to be there and participate, and I think that obviously motivated him to be there. He ran third in two turf stakes, as you said, last year to sneak into the Breeders' Cup, but he wasn't close in either of them.
Yeah.
And his workouts are solid, but they're kind of workouts you want to see in a horse you're going to test in an allowance, and maybe not even in a high level allowance, maybe in a mid level allowance.
Yeah. Yeah, to be honest, I think it's, not to cut you off, Dan, I think his turf, excuse me, not his turf, his filly that he has in the race has a better chance than this one.
I would agree. I'd say just as a funny side story, probably the most important thing that American Grandeur did was keep Mario Gutierrez away from Gulfstream Park this weekend.
Yeah.
So, perfect class, didn't get a chance to get him. And I'm not sure who would have gotten him in the turf if it would have been Mickey or not. But obviously Mario Gutierrez is a big time turf jockey and gets pulled into this dirt race. I think everything about him is kind of counterintuitive. He'd be the longest shot on the board in my eyes.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Although we do have, in post 15 and also eligible horse, another really not strange entry. I can see where it comes from, but probably a horse that's looking up at some in this field, Hunter's Ridge from Nakamura Stables. I know Nakamura puts a lot of horses like this who get a good mile work in these races, and sometimes they have a lot of talent, but I think this one has a lot to prove. And just considering the caliber of horses in this field, and this is probably going to be maybe the third or fourth toughest dirt route race until the Derby, maybe even more than that. And so having just like a maybe okay allowance horse in this real race, it's probably going to be rough for you.
Yeah, 3, 4, 5 horses out of this race are going to be in the Derby most likely. So this is long shot for sure.
Yep, and long shots do happen in this game, and this horse has a lot of speed. I didn't see a ton of speed, so maybe he ends up on the lead, contending with Crack the Party. That he could play a factor in the race for sure. I think it's gonna be a long shot.
Yeah, maybe that's his play. He's coming out of those sprint races, so we'll have to see what transpires there.
All right, we're gonna move right along, and so what is your pick for this race?
I'm going with the one horse, Arundel Farms. Go Rogue Laga. I think it's gonna be tough to beat. You?
My brain says Go Rogue Laga, but my heart will go with Quiet Return.
Okay, I like that pick. I'll be rooting for him. So we have 3 huge races, right, at Gulfstream Park. And we'll kind of go through these a little quicker because we are on a little bit of a time constraint. We did want to cover these because they are huge and the purses are are fairly big. We have the Pegasus filly and mare turf. That's a grade 3 at Gulfstream Park, going a mile and 16th on the grass for $500. Starting off, you have Maggie Green. This old mare, she's keeps knocking. I think she's been in a Breeders' Cup race ever since I joined HRP. It seems like she drew the rail, has speed. I think he's going to have to use it, get good position to make an impact in this race.
Yeah, I love that mare, and crazy to see her doing well at 8 years old. It's tough to resist breeding these days, so really cool to see. She has a chance. Post two, we have Marner, a filly of mine who has a ton of speed. Mostly, I answered her in this race because she did win the Grade One rodeo last year, and she has a lot of speed. And I think in this race engine, I've been seeing horses that worked well on the and didn't do as well with the previous race engine run well. So I figured why not throw her in with a shot? But I think she's probably one of the longer shots on the board.
Number 3, common misconception for Nakamura Stables. This one here, I was a little confused on the workout pattern. I see 109 and 2 at Gulfstream Park for 6 furlongs, then came back in 110 and 1. 109 and 2 is awfully good. I would say that's borderline elite. Another speed horse that's going to be contending for the pace in the race.
Yeah, my question with her is I kind of feel like she's done better going even longer. The race might be a bit short for her being just 8.5, but she's talented. Probably a little bit of an outsider, but not without a shot.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Made the Choice High, a 7-year-old mare who's been running at this level a lot for a while. She's coming off of a second place in an allowance race at Gulfstream. She's mostly been running long routes as well. I think sometimes horses appreciate the shorten up in distance, but this feels a bit of a reach to me with this mare, 7-year-old. Has some decent works recently, but nothing stellar. I think she's looking up similar to Marner in this race to try to compete with the best of the best.
Number 5, we have Demanding Commander for Hippie Heart Stables, Boca Chica in the irons. This one here, I don't think there's a chance of rain. I think it was 24%. I guess we never know at HRP. If it rains, watch out. This horse is going to be there. If not, she has good form on turf. I think she has a chance to do some damage. She does look like she runs a little better going a route of ground. Mile 16th might be a little too short for her in my book.
Next up, we have Stellar Agent, a mare from Raj's stable, a 5-year-old mare. She won the Grade 1 Taylor last year. She's really competitive and fast filly. I think that she is one of the more likely horses to be coming late in the race. I think that it'll be interesting to see how she does, improving from the previous race engine where she was coming from last in a lot of her races up before the Breeders' Cup. And she has a really nice recent work, but she wouldn't be my pick. Chris, shout out to you. You did breed this one a while ago. I bet you have a bit of a rooting interest.
Yeah, I would like to see her run well. I think it's a step up to Grade 1, like you mentioned. That was a big win. Didn't show up in the Breeders' Cup. It'd be interesting to see what she does this weekend. Number 7, we have Shining Moments for R&P Stables with Rodriguez in the irons. This one just coming out of a dirt race, Grade 3, won pretty handily by 2 lengths. For me, I like this horse on dirt rather than turf. That's not to say she can't run on the grass. She's 4 for 12. But I think she's going to be one of the longer shots to win this one.
Next up, we have Versailles from Dom from DJC Racing Stables, a 5-year-old mare. She actually won 3 Grade 1s last year. Very sneaky. I mean, I do remember talking about her before the Breeders' Cup as a pretty interesting option. She didn't like the track that day, but we're probably going to get a firm turf. I think the biggest factor to consider here is her last work was probably her worst in a while. Sometimes with these 5-year-olds, they get up there in age, but if she runs her A game like she did in the First Lady or the Beverly D or Just a Game, she's a specialist at this mid-mile distance. She might be a really sneaky one. She'd be one that if I was playing, exactas tries that I'd include because she's a sneaky one to do really well at this distance.
Number 9, we have probably one of the greatest mares in the game to ever race. That's
in my opinion.
Terry Fiant. I think so as well. 8 years old. I'm surprised he hasn't retired her and bred her already, but
That shows how
Here she
great she
is.
is that Smokey won't retire.
Yeah, longevity. Earn her over $8,000. Amazing. Last time out, finished fourth, two behind in a mile race. That was a grade one. Did finish second in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf race. I just wonder when she's going to start slowing down and if this is the race that is going to show up.
All right, next up, I have the privilege of introducing the Super Mare, Perfect Class from Jim from SCCJ Stables. She is a 10 for 11 lifetime on turf, and she went undefeated on turf last year. What more can be said? She's amazingly fast. She's tough. She can run any distance. The one weakness is she might be better going longer, and maybe this is a bit short for her. And she's at an outside post, but it's hard to pick against her. She's an unbelievable filly. She's going to be in the running for Horse of the Year. She's almost definitely going to win Turf Filly and 3-year-old filly. Fantastic horse. Didn't get the jockey she wanted. That's maybe one storyline to watch out for, but can't look past her. She's unbelievable.
Yeah, she still has it too. 109 and 1 workout.
Blazing.
It's quick. Yeah. Number 11, we have Fangs of the Storm for Aradel with Franco in the irons. This one coming out of the same matriarch, grade 1, as La Terre Fiant. Finished second, half a length back. I like this distance for this horse. Outside post, I'm not crazy about. But I think this is a distance specialist horse that we're talking about. A miler, mile and 16, plays right up to her alley. November 14th, 6 furlongs at Churchill, 109 and 2, shows she's in form. So I'm expecting a big run out of this one.
Finally, closing out the field, post 12, we have always Condottieri, a 5-year-old filly from Mileto. Again, don't want to be too harsh, but I do feel like she's more of like that grade 3, middle graded stakes type of filly. She's always had a little bit of trouble against some of the top level competition. So it's gonna, she's gonna have to bring her A game. She did win the grade 1 Wiley last year, but gonna have a tough one against some of these mares.
Who's your pick in this race?
I am not going to play contrarian here. I'm going to go for Perfect Class. I think she's got more at the end of the day than the rest of them. So I'm going to go Perfect Class.
Yeah, I'm with you on the same boat. We're going to play the favorite on this one. Look forward to that race. It should be a good one. Another huge race we have on the card, the Pegasus World Cup Turf. That's a grade 1. That's for 4-year-olds and up, going a mile and 1/8 on the turf. That's for $1,000. Again, in HRP money, that's what, $1 million, right, Dan?
Yep.
Big race. And we have a previous Breeders' Cup winner on the rail for Nakamura Stables in Nevada Silver. This one here, form is been off a little lately. Last win came back in October, Santa Anita, prepping for the Breeders' Cup Turf. That was a grade 2, going a mile and a quarter. Didn't run so well at the Breeders' Cup Turf. I don't know if it was the off track that played a part. Came back in another grade 2 at Aqueduct in November. It's coming off a layoff. It's going to have to run big. He may need a race to get the best out of this horse.
Coming up in the double rail draw for Nakamura, we have number 2 horse Jakarta, Gabriel. Did the recording just stop?
Yeah, we're good. It went back on. Little glitch.
Okay. All right. Little technical difficulties here.
Yeah.
Jakarta coming out of the San Gabriel ran a tough second. The biggest thing to mention here is that 134 flat work. I think that he's the kind of horse that talent-wise he can compete with anybody. Maybe the new engine helps him. This is a really competitive field. He would be one that, especially if there's pick'em races, I think he's a fantastic choice for those sort of races. Another Patterson bred, so they do well on big days.
And number 3, you have Mickey, South Shore Stables with Rodriguez in the irons. This one pulled off the upset in the Breeders' Cup Turf. This horse was on the Derby Trail last year, thinking dirt, dirt, dirt. He switches over to turf, and he's ultra competitive. Came back to win the Hollywood Derby against 3-year-olds as well. So I'm expecting big things out of him in this race.
Moving on to number 4, we have Show Me How to Live, a very lightly tested horse to be racing such a high-level race with some of these grinders who have been going at top turf competition for years. Just 10 career starts, another Patterson bred coming out of Momentum Farms. He's really fast, some nice breezes. The one weakness I kind of see in him is he's gotten pretty far behind in some of his races, and maybe that was because of the crazy pace, the Mohawk, or the off track in the Commonwealth. But this is a gigantic step up. It would be tough. This would be quite an upset if he wins, not because of his talent, just lack of experience.
Number 5, Devil Made Me Do It, Maximilian Farm. Again, another horse that's stepping up. Had a nice win out of a grade 2, won by a nose last time out at Del Mar, November 26th. I think it's going to have to run ultra best race to be competitive in this field.
Next up, we have an old favorite of mine, PXG, coming out of my barn, drawn in a perfect spot in post 6 right in the middle of the field. He had a really good, really fantastic end of his year last year, and I thought he had a really good chance to do well in the Breeders' Cup Mile, but he kind of flopped that day. So I'm not sure what to expect. He's a 7-year-old. He is mega fast. I mean, his workouts are crazy fast. I'm interested to see what he can do. I do think he has a shot. Again, I'm biased, but I think he has a pretty good shot.
Number 7, we have Key Biscayne, Twin Towers. Again, Tommy being involved in these big races, great to see. This horse ran huge in the Breeders' Cup Turf, finishing second, one behind. It looks like he's going to come off the pace. He's going to need some racing luck and to weave through traffic and get there. Last work January 4th, quite a ways away. A while ago, 110-2 breezing. Not a bad work, but I would like to see something more recent from him.
All right, next up we have Tyrannical from Arundel Farms, a 5-year-old gelding who has always been a phenomenal talent. He's, makes 134 flat workouts his regular business. He sometimes cracks one into the 133s. Just a super horse, ran third in the Breeders' Cup Mile and really had a great chance to win that race. I think he got a little unlucky almost to not win, considering. And yeah, he's going to be one of the favorites in this race, absolutely.
Number 9, we have Contradiction from my buddy AER Stables, Dave. This horse is a dirt horse. We don't have much to go on as far as recent form, other than an allowance of non-winners of 3 other than. Looked like he dead heated there. He has a nice work on dirt, 110 flat, January 19th. If you're talking about turf, which this race is on, you got to go all the way back to October 16th to get a turf work going a mile. He did work 134-2, so he may have some talent there on grass. We'll have to see what he can prove in this race.
Next up in post 10, we have King K Niagara, a superstar turf horse last year, and probably one of the other favorites in this race. He unfortunately, he's not much of an off-track fan. He was on auto scratch in the Breeders' Cup and didn't make the race. But coming into that race, he had just rattled off 3 Grade 1 route races. And then he tried the dirt in the Clark. He ran a respectable 5th, I felt. But 6-year-old still working amazing. The distance may be a bit tight for him. He really does well going longer, but he has a great shot.
Number 11, we have Boardwalk Empire for Smokey Stover. This one, I thought he would have retired and started breeding. I know he's in love with the pedigrees. By con artist out of Quiver Pond. Doesn't get much better than that. This is going to be a step up as far as competition goes. He did win his last race by a nose at Gulfstream Park last day of the year. Interesting to see. He doesn't have any recent work, so tough to know what kind of condition or form this horse is in.
Next up, we have Let's Do It, Big Boy, 9-year-old Cherokee Sunset gelding. I think maybe I'm wrong, but I think from his first crop. I mean, this is how experienced this horse is. He's a fantastic horse. You always ask the question, how long are they going to last? He's had 65 races. He ran second by a nose in the Breeders' Cup Mile, also a bit unlucky not to get there. Won the Woodbine Mile. He's as good as any in this field. The only slight knock on him, that last 134-4 workout is a bit slower than some others in here, but he's got a great shot.
Number 13, we have one of yours, Aerialist. This guy is obviously a marathon specialist. I wanted to ask you first how you feel about the cutback in distance. Obviously, he can run on off track or not. He's proven that. And then speak about his last work, January 24th, a couple of days ago at Aqueduct, 109 flat on the turf. Amazing.
Yeah, he's a really talented horse. I think that it was disappointing for me that he didn't win the Breeders' Cup because he's probably the best off-track worker I've ever had. And coming out of that race, I did sort of think maybe distance is just not his thing, and he just got lucky in some previous spots. So maybe the 9 furlongs is more up his alley. The post makes it really tough though, and post 13, I don't know what to expect, but um, hopefully he'll give a good run. And then rounding out the field, post 14, we have Moonlight Special, 6-year-old gelding from All in the Gate. He's another one I would say he's been more used to that sort of mid stakes level company, grade 3 company. He just won at Churchill in a grade 3 handicap race, the River City Handicap, and this is a massive step up in class. I think he'd be a surprise.
And who are you going to land on for the win in here?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I think that
It is.
post is going to play a big role in this race. And for me, it sort of came down to Mickey versus Tyrannical. And in the end, I think that this is the sort of race that Mickey just happens, always shows up big. So I'm going to go with the Breeders' Cup champ. I'm going to go with the top 3-year-old turf horse of last year. I'm going to go with Mickey.
That's kind of funny that you mentioned that because I had the same thought process, being closer to the rail and forgetting about the outside a little bit. I'm going between Jakarta and Mickey. So we share the same thoughts on Mickey. I think Jakarta is going to run big. The mile and eighth, I think is well suited for him. And that last work, 134 flat, I like to see that. So I think he's going to run huge.
All
So
right.
that wraps it up for the Pegasus World Cup turf. And then we have the huge one, the Pegasus World Cup. Obviously, besides the Breeders' Cup, this is going to be the second biggest race of the year. So we have one at the end, and obviously this one in the beginning of the year. This one is a mile and eighth on $3,000, 3 million HRP money. And leading off, we have AGS Cherokee for RMP Stables. This one here obviously is a hard hitter. He's a 5-year-old gelding. He has some good form on dirt since coming off turf, and I think he could be a player here. He's going to be one of the longer shots to compete, but he does have a recent work of 136-1 on dirt at Gulfstream back on January 16th. And he, like I said, his last 3 starts, he finished 4th in the Grade 2 San Antonio. The Clark, he was 2nd, 1 behind. And the Lafayette, Grade 2 Keeneland, he was 3rd, a nose behind, all on dirt. So I like he's taking a shot here.
In post 2, we have On Schedule, a 5-year-old gelding, a very lightly raced 5-year-old coming out of my barn. He sort of found his niche as a marathon horse at the end of last year. He ran a competitive 4th in the Pacific Classic, and he's a really fantastic workhorse. He blossomed pretty late in his life. He was a very light horse for a while, and then just started working amazing, and gave him a shot. And he has really good tactical speed. I felt like he's just been working too good and has too much speed to not just give him a shot in these races. I expect him to be pretty forwardly placed, even though horses on the rail can get buried. But yeah, I think he's in there. He has a shot, especially a shot to at least hit the board and be amazing feat with only 11 career races.
Yeah, he's got a nice race record. Number 3, we have Mr. Pancake from Arundel. This is the buzz horse, I would say, this week, right? After working 135-2, which Brian posted up in the forums. You don't see that every day. Followed that back up with a 5-furlong work 2 days ago, 57-3. So this horse is ready to go. My only question is he going to get an easy lead? Haskell Travers ran big, finished 2nd in both of those, but he did have an easy lead in a half-mile pole. He was two in front in one race and 3 in another, and he still faded. So is the pressure going to get to him, or has he excelled in his developmental curve? He's at his peak right now? We'll find out on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm more of a steak and eggs guy myself. I don't like those pancakes. I don't like seeing them in this field. Moving on, the horse number 4, we have Home Spirit, hard knocking gelding from Raj from Night Rider Stables, 27 career races, and in these dirt routes, you often don't see them last as long. But he's been in there in a lot of big time spots. He's the kind of horse who he kind of sneaks up on you. His works are phenomenal, 109.4. But he's never run that A plus race that I think he's gonna need to win this one. Maybe the engine was in his way, but he's a lively long shot, but not one I would pick.
Next up, we have your top dog, number 5, Individuation. This horse rattled off, got super hot in the second half of the season and rattled off $6,600 in win money. Won the Breeders' Cup Classic. This is my horse of the year. I think will probably end up being horse of the year. Perfect Class made a great run. Just had to run into a horse that just accomplished a little more in my book. With that being said, you got to be happy with the 57-3 work. That's blazing. He's in form. Coming out of the 7 furlong Malibu, won by a nose. My only question is, obviously, you love Luis Saez, as we know. He's an early to mid jock. Roberto Hernandez, early to mid jock. You have Franco here, obviously, because jockeys were pulled in different directions with the prep races. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's the biggest thing that makes me nervous. I felt like the early and early mid type jocks were available, just weren't of the same caliber in this spot. So I went with Manny Franco, a jockey that he had done pretty well with in the past and had some good workouts with. But it's definitely one of the factors in this spot that makes me a bit more nervous. He's had a really hard campaign as well, and the purse was just too much to pass up. So he's been really active. I'm hoping it plays to his benefit, but he'll get a well-deserved break after this race regardless. So there's a few factors concerning me. New engine. You don't know how he'll do in that, but he's one of the best horses I've ever had, and excited to see how he runs on Saturday.
You did get a great draw with him, so that's good news.
I did, so I don't have to use his blazing speed like in the Kentucky Derby. I can have a little bit more tactical choice. All right, so post 6, another horse of mine, Sensei, a horse who ran 5th in the Breeders' Cup Classic. He won the Awesome Again, Grade 1. He had shown some inconsistency in his workouts for me, so I think that's the biggest concern coming in this race. But he was right there at the top of the Classic division last year, and I think he's the sort of horse that very deserving of being one of the middle or middle upper choices in this race, but probably not as likely to win. Hoping that I get a good run from him, and just felt he deserved a shot. So, obviously with Individuation there, it's not my best hope, but hopefully a good run from him.
Yeah, number 7, we have Amon from Arendelle. Between you and Brian, you guys have a 6-pack in here, man. It's going to be tough to compete with you guys. This horse obviously was on the Kentucky Derby Trail last year early on, ran huge in the Preakness, lost by a nose. More recently, he's coming out of the Grade 2 San Antonio, finished second, half length behind. Has speed. I think he's going to need to use it to establish position here. And we'll see if he's good enough. I think he's a cut below the best here.
Yep, absolutely. Next up, we have Sports Page from you. A couple of your horses you unfortunately didn't draw as far inside, but still post 8's pretty decent spot. Sports Page, he's a big race runner. That's the best way I can describe him. He ran second in the Breeders' Cup Classic. He seems to always give his A game in the biggest races. He's a tough horse. He doesn't win a whole lot, but he's always there. And the workouts I would say is a bit of a concern. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. How do you feel like he's coming into the race, or are you at all concerned that at 5 that he's past his peak? What's your confidence level?
Yeah, I am a little bit. Obviously, it's not what you want to see. 110-3, 110-3, 110-4. And then I cut him back to 5. He shows 58 flat. It's, he's worked 57 and change when he's at the peak condition. So I don't know if it's the campaign last year. I gave him a little break after Breeders' Cup. If you ask me honestly, I think he might be tailing off. But I had the huge purse here, had to throw him in. He's going to be coming from behind. Maybe picks up the pieces. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Yep.
Number 9, we have Oleg, another Arendelle runner for Brian. This one here. I don't know what to make of this horse, honestly. It's kind of good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. Last race, last day of the year at Gulfstream Park in a Grade 3, finished 8th, 4 back. No excuses other than maybe the outside post, but showed speed, faded. I don't think the longer distance is going to suit him or help him here.
In post 10, we have another horse from you, Hand Cannon, a lightly tested 4-year-old gelding. You claimed him last year. Really impressive claim. He ran fantastic in that race. He ran third in the Pennsylvania Derby, just behind Individuation that day. He's had some really, really nice allowance races. If it does come up as an off track, he has some experience winning there. His workouts are pretty solid. He kind of an up and coming horse in a lot of ways. But would you agree? Probably a bit of a longer shot.
Yeah, he's a cut below the best, and maybe even a little further down from that. But I had to give him an opportunity after the Parks race. He ran third to Individuation. I thought he was going to get there, the way that he was running, and he showed up in the allowance race, and he just quite didn't have the kick in the last race, mile 16. So hoping the added distance helps him improve a little bit. He can step up, and maybe he can hit the board for me. Number 11, we have White Sunshine for Smokey Stover Stable. This one here, last two on an off track. Time before that, he's a mile Churchill, October 1st in the ACAC, grade 3. He won that by 1. I just think, again, this is a horse that's a cut below the best in here. It's going to be tough. The distance, I don't think, is going to enable him to turn the tables on any of the top horses here. And then that last work that he had back on January 22nd, going a mile 134 flat on turf, I would have liked to see him on turf rather than dirt, me personally.
Next up, post 12, we have All Take, a horse that I've learned my lesson on speaking down on. He's a extremely inconsistent horse, but when he shows up big. The winner of the Preakness last year just narrowly missed in the Pennsylvania Derby. The workouts are never stellar on this one, but I feel like if the race gets hot up front, he's the kind of horse that picks up the pieces, and because of that, he always has a shot. Longer shot because of that, because he's a bit pace dependent, but not without a shot.
Yeah, he showed up huge, huh? Especially, I think we discounted him in a race last year.
I think I said he has no chance of winning the Preakness.
Yeah, the Preakness.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't count that horse out. Doesn't matter what post he has or anything. He could come flying. Number 13, Great Bonkers. I'm getting all my buddies' horses today. Dave from AER Stables. I don't know what to say about this one, honestly. I'm not going to trash a horse because he's done well with him. He must have some type of magical touch, because Smokey, who's one of the better players in the game, had trouble winning a $50,000 claiming race with him. Had to drop down to 18, which he got claimed out of. He won by a head. And he's been great for Dave ever since, winning turf races. And, you have to mention the Breeders' Cup Mile that he won by a nose wire to wire. That was impressive. Didn't think he was going to do much last out in the Clark, grade 1 on November 25th, going a mile and eighth, and he won that one. He beat your horse in there. So you stole his jockey. I'm sure he's not too happy with you for doing that. But you do have Silvera, right? Or am I misspeaking on that?
Yeah, I took him at Oaklawn.
Oh, Oaklawn, yeah. So he's probably not too happy about that, but we'll have to see. Outside post, which he's done well. Breeders' Cup Mile, he's in post 12. Woodbine Mile, he finished second. He was in post 13. So I can't discount him as much as I want to.
And then finally, rounding out the field, we have Higher Drift. Higher Drift, the second place finisher in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, who got in that race from a really nice win in the Kelso handicap. Interesting horse. He has had some really fast works, but they've been inconsistent. He's 6 years old now. I tend to think he ran the race of his life in the Breeders' Cup and the Kelso to be in that stage. And the Classic division is just a bit harder than the Mile division, but he's not without a chance. He has a lot of speed, and I think he'll be closing late. It'll be interesting to see if he's in contention there, but I think he's looking up at some of the rest in this field.
Obviously, you're a little biased because you have a pending Horse of the Year on line with Individuation. Who are you going with in this one?
I got to stick to Individuation. I have to have confidence in him. I think early on in the race engine, I saw so many closers doing well, and I just thought, Mr. Pancake is perfectly suited for this sort of race engine. But now that I've seen a bit more, I have to say I feel like I have a decent shot. I think Mr. Pancake, to be fair, is probably the favorite on talent, but maybe Individuation just has that something special that carried him last year, so I'll stick with him.
Yeah, he's my pick as well. Until again he proves me otherwise, or the campaign catches up to him. I think the talent, he's just heads and shoulder above. I think obviously the Breeders' Cup Classic was a much tougher race. I think if he runs his race in this race, he'll be right there. I'm curious to see what Mr. Pancake will do off that crazy mile work. So I'll be looking for him too to see if he can improve for Brian in this huge spot. So interesting, and look forward to seeing that race.
Absolutely.
So we have a bunch of other stakes races, and we're going to breeze through these and just mention what the race is. And what I want you to do is pick your winner, who you think the winner will be in these races. Are you down to do that?
Yeah, sure. So, I don't think we have time for analysis, but we'll just go through quickly and say who our winner is.
Yeah. So the first race up, we have the Toboggan. That's a grade 3 at Aqueduct, going 7 furlongs on the dirt for 4-year-olds and up. Who'd you land on in there?
Yeah, I like Crypto a lot, but I think I'm going to pick the rail horse on the turning away. Interested to see how the jockeys fare here, but he looks like he's in good form right now. What about you?
Yeah, I landed on Crypto. I think he's the best horse in the race. I think he has great form right now. But I also think Queen's Commander will run big as well. So that's my exacta there. Next up, we have the La Preveillante Handicap, Gulfstream Park. Hopefully, I pronounced that right. That's for fillies, mile and a half on the turf, 4-year-olds and up. Who do you like in here?
I like Come On Y'all, the commanding filly from Arundel Farms. Drawn well. I think she's done really well in these longer turf races. I just think she's an up and comer that it keeps getting better, and she's in a good spot to win.
I landed on Build Battle in here. I think she loves the distance. One of the other notes I wrote down is I felt the race came up a little light in my book, so it'd be interesting to see how that one plays out. Next race we have up is the Hooper. That's a grade 3 at Gulfstream Park, going a mile on the dirt for 4-year-olds and up. It's an interesting race. Who'd you land on here?
Yeah, I landed on an old favorite, Sexy Back from Knight Rider Stables. He's a horse that I think when he runs his A game, he's a really tough horse to beat. He ran really well in the Awesome Again, just losing by a nose, or else he would have been in the Classic. I think this is the kind of competition that he feeds off of, and he'll do very well. What about you?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Last 2 races on an off track, I throw those out, and he's back with his own kind, so I have him for the win as well. McKnight Stakes, that's a grade 3, Gulfstream Park, mile and a half on the turf. That's for 4-year-olds and up. A field of 8. Who do you have?
Yeah, this horse, I've said it a million times. I'll keep saying it. I think he should be running in the Pegasus turf. I think Billy Joel is one of the best turf horses in the game, and he's just, sometimes he's in these grade 2s and grade 3s, and he should win them. He's so good. I think he crushes this field. What do you got?
I landed on Afterburner, maybe a little biased, but I think he's a distance specialist, and I think, with the distance that they're running at today, he has a shot to pull an upset.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a nice one too.
Inside Information, that's going to be a grade 2. Again, at Goldstream has a huge card on Pegasus.
Big card.
7 furlongs. Yeah, 7 furlongs on the dirt. Fillies and mares, 4-year-olds and up. We got a field of 9.
I landed on There's No Doubt. She was one of the ones I thought was a little bit more surprising to end up on the awards list, but you look back at last year and you see why. Won the Charlestown Oaks and ran second in the La Brea. That second in the La Brea was just a phenomenal race, and I think her form right now is top notch. I think she's going to be tough.
Yeah, I like Bella Chica. I'm going to throw her last race out, and I think she loves the distance, and I'm looking for her for the win. Next up, we have the Connolly Breeders' Cup Turf, grade 3. That's going to be at Houston, a mile and a half on the turf. Got a lot of marathon races going on today, on Saturday. That's for 4-year-olds and up. And we have a field of 8. Who do you like in there?
This is a tough one, and there may be some off track shenanigans here. We'll see. But maybe I'm a bit biased, but I really like my horse Master of Disguise. I think this is a great spot for him to prove himself. He's been working phenomenally. A really lightly tested 4-year-old who's just getting better and better and better. I think this is a good spot for him. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree with you. He's burning up the track in the morning, and I think he loves the distance and he has the talent. So it's a good opportunity to prove himself. I would like to say an honorable mention, Cascade King. I think he'll run big to fill up the exacta. Next up, we have the Houston Ladies Classic Grade 3. That's a mile and 16 turf. for fillies and mares, 4-year-olds and up. And we have a big winner of Breeders' Cup Day in there.
Yeah, and that
Who did you land on? Yeah.
yeah, that has to be my pick too. Karloff's Monster, Breeders' Cup Distaff winner. There's not a lot of huge distaff races, and early in the year, this is one of the bigger ones, and she's coming here to defend her crown. I feel like, and she'd be my pick. She's really good filly.
Yeah, I've always been high on her, and I'm taking her right back as well for the win. Next up, we have the Las Virgenes Stakes. That's at Santa Anita, going a mile on the dirt for fillies 3-year-olds. Has implications on the Kentucky Oaks. And who'd you land on here?
Yeah, so I landed on Up She Flew, a really fast filly from Air Stables. Dave has a nice one here. The biggest question with her is, does she want distance? But I think with the mile, she's well suited enough to do well there. She was closing in the San Ynez. She has 110 and 2 works. I think her talent will carry her there in this race. What about you?
Yeah, landed on the same. Went with Dave's horse, Up She Flew. Again, a little weird, no work since last, but I think she'll like the mile, as you mentioned, the distance. The competition wasn't too tough in that race, so I think she'll prove to be best in there. Next up, we have the San Pasqual, also at Santa Anita. That's a grade 2, going a mile and 1/8 for 4-year-olds and up on the dirt. Who'd you land on in here?
Yeah, so this is a tough one because I feel like you have to pick between bad posts, bad form, or lack of experience, and I went for the bad form with Puppet Master. The 109 and 3 work is just so stellar. I don't know if he's a router, but he's just a fast horse, and I think that in this race engine he's going to do pretty well. So that's my pick.
Yeah, this is a tough race for me. I went with a long shot. I'm going upset special with the Pennine Way. I think that's how it's pronounced, with Frankie Dettori. He's a new jockey for us here at Santa Anita, and maybe he goes gate to wire. I don't know. I'm just taking a shot there. And then we also have one more last stakes race. It's not graded. It is the Martha Washington. And again, that's another race that has Kentucky Oaks implications. Sokolon Park, going a mile on the dirt for 3-year-old fillies. It's going to be a tough race. That's probably the toughest race out of all the ones we've covered today. Toss up for me. Who do you like?
Yeah, I like Lone Star Annie, the filly from Con Artist. Aladar paid up for that cover, and he got a really good one with it. I think that last work, 110 and 3, that is super competitive. This is the filly that if she was in the Southwest, like some of these other fillies, I would have been scared. So I think that she is ready to roll and just looks primed for a big effort. What about you?
Yeah, as I mentioned, a toss-up for me, if I did anything, it would be like a trifecta box. I like 3 horses that I think are going to be competitive with Criminals, Lone Star Annie, as you mentioned, and Calm Fury. I think those are the top 3 in the race, and they should prove out to be, hopefully. So, Any lasting thoughts on all these stakes races that we covered? I know we went over a little bit on time, but any lasting impressions that you want to mention?
I think my only lasting thing is, there's a lot of big races this weekend, and I think with the new race engine, even if you're not in these races, I think it's worthwhile to watch them all and see how they play out and see how the tactics play out for people. We've only had a glimpse of what this engine can be, and I think this is going to be the truth-telling weekend for the engine. What about you? Any thoughts?
I'm working all weekend, so I'm not going to be able to watch live, but unfortunately, weekends in the car business. But I'm going to, when I get off, I'm going to watch the races. It's a lot of great races, a lot of marathon races, I think is going to prove out to be useful. And like you mentioned, watching those and gathering information on those races as well. I wish everybody luck. I wish you luck in the big race. And hopefully everybody gets, everybody gets a trip that they can deal with, right? I mean, you want a fair shot to win these races, and it'll be interesting to see how tactics play out this weekend. So I appreciate everybody joining us today. We will be back next week, hopefully, to review the HRP awards and the aftermath of all these stakes races. Until then, I appreciate you guys joining us, and let's race.